Two guys in the dark.
I'll be calling myself Julie. A couple of things before we dive into the tale of my creepy colleagues and not-so-secret admirers. I was in my early and mid-20s when this went on. I'm 1.67 meters tall. Google says I'm 5'4", curly blonde, blue eyes. I'm 55 kilograms light, which is 121 pounds, saying Google. I'm a girl, a rather typical bus driver, as you may imagine. And as you might quickly notice, English is neither my first nor second language. So after 3 years of driving buses in a place that I shall not mention, I found a job opportunity in a foreign country that spoke my language. I had seen many strange things already in my 3 years, but nothing could compare me to what was ahead. I'll be talking about the creepy colleagues today, although a lot was going on at the same time. I'll not go into details, but mobbing by a superior took place, homelessness, a psycho boyfriend, and let's not forget I have no family. Grandparents died before I was born. I was an only child, no cousins, aunts, uncles. Borderline violent mother who loved beating me up. You know, all the fun stuff. This is important, not so that I can play a sad little violin while telling my story, but that so many will understand why sometimes when someone throws me a rope, I have been stupid and naive enough to think that it was out of the goodness out of their heart. I'd like to think everyone has good in them, and will not misuse a situation for their selfish gain. Oh, how I was wrong. When I arrived at my new workplace, I had a lot to take in. I had new colleagues to show me the bus routes every day. The money is different, the schedules are very special, and while I was on my third day, I was with a man who was then 65 years old. He looked at me in a weird way from the start, but I had brushed it off as him being impressed that a young girl like me can drive these buses so gently and smoothly. I wasn't proud of much about myself, but back then, other than my uncanny bus driving skills, I looked really tiny in that seat driving these 13 to 19 meter vehicles. He made me pull in at a parking in a village during the first break of our 10-hour day to look me up and down and say, looking hungrily at my t-shirt with a wolf on, I hadn't gotten the uniform yet. Do you like animals, Julie? In that eerie, calm tone. I answered, yeah, sure. Animals are cool. Then he almost salivated while saying, oh, Julie, if only I was a little bit younger. We would have so much in common, while staring without blinking at my chest. I still remember his piercing blue eyes and tall, dry body, and that creepy stare. At another break, we were in another village. Yep, a very picturesque sight. I still give them that. And he told me to follow him to a little restaurant, the only one for miles around. I sat down and let my eyes feast on the beautiful landscapes. Then I looked over the table to find the piercing baby blue creeper eyes staring through my soul. He made me order food and dessert and a Coca-Cola and coffee afterwards, and not let me, for the life of myself, pay for my half. I tried insisting, but nothing would make him change his mind. After all, I thought that he made me come here, and surely he's just being polite, so I didn't want to seem rude on my first week. It was a war that I couldn't win. Anyways, as he paid while I was in the toilet, he did insist that we go for a coffee after our shift. Again, I wasn't too happy to oblige, but I thought that I should give a good impression with my new colleagues. So I went to be stared down by him in the train station coffee place. Again, he paid before I could even protest, and I said, the next one is on me, hoping to God that there would be no next time, but maybe just buy him some coffee at the coffee machine at the bus depot. We sat down, and again he was scanning the wolf on my t-shirt with his laser blue eyes while asking something about my personal life. I decided, passive-aggressively, to set things straight. I answered, yeah, but you know my boyfriend is just waiting to come join me here. You know we've been together for what, 5 years? Yeah, I miss him. Let me just say that these were just words, to discourage any weird thought that this old man might have had in his twisted mind. Yes, I did have a boyfriend, but just to explain things quickly, I have a restraining order against him now. Violence, gaslighting, and psychological violence were just a few of his ways to show me love, and that's a story for another day. My little tactic worked. I saw it in his eyes that went from hopeful, enamored, smiley eyes to absolute pure evil. The rage was almost tangible every time I uttered the word boyfriend, and I laid it on heavy. I must say, I wanted the message to get through. I hoped that it did. Some days later, I came across him in the driver's office, and he did the typical quick kiss we do on each other's cheeks, a custom that's in our country. But his kisses were wet. Yes, you heard that right. It was disgusting. I had to go to the bathroom and wipe freaking saliva off of my cheek. I wanted to throw up. He really tried to get as close to me as his lips could, even though the tradition is on the freaking cheeks. If I had said anything, he would have played it off as an accident, or in my head. But I just knew that. Plus, I was very new, and my jealous manager really had it in for me, from the beginning. Let's say mildly that she really disliked me. I couldn't complain or do anything about this man, but just let him know by my attitude that I was not vibing with him. Later on, when he heard that I had nowhere to live, he thought that it would be a good idea to try and let me rent a room at his house. My house is big and empty, you know, Julie. It wouldn't be a bother, while looking at my chest and mumbling something about his nice bathroom. I politely declined. He said, "Oh, that's a pity," and something about his soft towels in his bathroom. I could swear that he licked his mouth, but maybe I was just seeing things. The last time this creeper spoke with me was 1 week before I left the company. That was 2 years later. He got onto my bus at the terminal and wanted to get off at the next stop, but he asked if I could drop him off between stops. To us drivers, we all know that that's a big no-no. So I calmly explained, as if he didn't know, for some reason, being in a good mood and letting him know that he never got to me. I said, "Unless you pay me 100 euros. He said, "Oh, that's expensive. Can I pay you in kind?" I was like, "Hell no." This weirdo is still trying me. I let him believe that I was confused, just to prove my point. He was like, "Woot!" He quickly responded, "You know, like kisses and other stuff." I just looked at him. Joke's over. There never was any joke. I looked him dead in the eye. He finally bowed his wrinkled, dried-out head and looked down. I opened the doors and let him out at the next stop. Told him goodbye. He went on his merry way, and I only saw him once ever since then, when I worked for a new bus company. He tried coming over to me and talked as if we were good old friends. I was cold as ice, and he finally got the hint. This is Julie, back with part 2 of my bus driving experience with creepy colleagues around every corner, or so it seemed. To understand my background, please refer yourself to part 1 of this story. To sum it up, I'm a 167 centimeters tall, 55-kilogram girl who chose to drive buses for a living. I started all of this when I was 23. I'm from Europe, so I was just settling in at my new bus company in my mid-20s in a foreign country that spoke my language. I was looked up at, quite bizarrely at best, as the company didn't have any other women besides me, and another girl a couple of years older than me. We were both newcomers, but we were oh so different. I could talk about the colleague roughly my age who had a long-term girlfriend, yet insisted on rubbing my shoulders and giving me quick kisses on the cheeks, then blushing like an anime schoolgirl. Or I could tell you about the colleague from another bus company who came up to me to talk, but then said hi and stood there and let me do the talking, interrupted by long, uncomfortable silences while looking at me with a blank stare. Or the balloon-headed grandpa driver with the smallest eyes that I've ever seen, that was running between me and the other girl in the driver's room like a dog running after a bone that has been thrown, suggesting that we do something in the upstairs room, just the three of us. I could swear that I almost saw his tail wagging while he was sniffing the air around us. But oh no, I have much worse in store. I'll call him Mirko in this story. Mirko spotted me on the very first day of my arrival. He had a chubby face, dark blue eyes, a pretty big head. It was pretty big. Not like fat, just big, and hopelessly unattractive, by his looks and his demeanor. His attitude and the way of looking at the opposite sex was best described by one word: thirsty. He was common trait among the men that worked with. By the way, few were getting it at home, obviously. And another thing we had in common with most men that I worked with: he was married and had grown kids. He didn't approach me much at first. He was observing the waters, and as bus drivers' lives go, there is not a lot of action in their lives, so creating rumors and drama scratches the itch for them. And you might have guessed that the arrival of a female, as the incels will call it, at their workplace was not to please everyone. So Mirko kept his ears open and decided to pose as a friend to me. We started talking, and he seemed pretty friendly. I was told by management to bond with my colleagues. Apparently my friendly attitude and small talk wasn't enough. But then again, seeing as they were taunting me, nothing ever was. So I bonded, and with Mirko too. We had some Eastern European origins in common, and a love for goulash soup with a thing we bonded over. We would always discuss the latest episodes of the series Arrow, and it was nice talking about something different, besides the number bus that I was driving, and when my break was. He then began warning me about practically everything, if I'd missed some crucial road-related information, or about people that I should be very suspicious of, raising one eyebrow while showing off his detective skills. Little by little, we started sharing small stories about our lives. I even complained a little bit about the management and what they were putting me through, and he was shaking his head and always saying that they're so dishonest. That was the phrase. I quickly noticed that he liked listening to himself talk more than he liked listening to me. But then again, seriously, all the bus drivers in that place are like that. It's difficult to have a real conversation, as they have some macho man insecurities and need to cut their sentence in half constantly, and never really listen to anything. I had made my peace with that, and never really gave them important information anyways. Sometimes that always annoyed me, though. He always asked a question, then let me have exactly 7 seconds to answer before he'd talk about something else. It was systematic, but whatever. It was nicer talking to him than the others at that time. When this came to the first birthday gift, I said, "Oh, I can't accept this." But he insisted. Well, it was a mug, saying that I love you and your friendship means the world to me. He insisted 1,000 times that just as a friend, of course. In the meanwhile, he was getting more and more comfortable sharing details of his not-so-happy marriage life and his general unhappiness. I wasn't the happiest either back then, so I took it upon myself to listen to him, because I could never refuse to listen to a human being in pain. Imagine if them being able to speak to someone, in this case me, makes them feel any better. But I felt gradually more uncomfortable when the details about the sexual life in the marriage came up. Again, I wasn't in the best mindset either, and had a hard time setting boundaries, so I listened on. I gave him a little gift too when his birthday came around. Just some special Manuka honey, as I heard it had great benefits for health, and I was trying to convince him to eat less sugar. I guess he thought that since I cared just a little, that must mean something. I really don't know. Now lots of what's happening happened. Stuff at work, stuff in our private lives. We would just hang out on occasion. And when I was in the process of breaking up with my then boyfriend, a breakup that would have been easy for everyone, but the boyfriend made it into a real hell, as he had made my life hell for 5 years. I mean violence. And I had to involve the police on many occasions, death threats, manipulation of all kinds, vengeance by tarnishing my reputation everywhere from my colleagues to the passengers in the buses. I asked Mirko, as he was a grown man, and I had nobody to help me, one day if he would go to the apartment with me and get the rest of my stuff. He didn't even have to go with me or deal with my psycho ex. who would normally not even be there, but just in case, so he could call the police. Mirko said no, but that didn't stop him from letting me know that all this time we had been friends, which had been 3 years now since I arrived in that country, that he had seen me as like a daughter, or a niece, or a friend, but now he sees me as a woman. I was like, what the hell? He said, I see you differently now, that you're not in a relationship anymore. I told myself, okay, so you want to mess around with me, but you don't want to help me when my life is potentially in danger? Duly noted. I got a good friend to go with me, grab some of my stuff out of that apartment. I was sleeping in some of my colleagues' spare bedrooms, waiting for a studio apartment to be signed over to me, close to work. It would take about a month. You may imagine, it was once again difficult times for me, but I tried to hold my head up high. Then came the real nightmare, revelations from Mirko. I only wanted to believe in good from him, and again I know now hindsight is only 20/20, and that is very naive. I had kindly told him that I saw him as a friend, and it would never change for me. I liked some part of our conversations, and I didn't necessarily have many friends to talk to at that time, so I was hoping for the best. When I could finally move into my tiny 15M2, 160 square feet, says Google, studio apartment, he said many times that if I have furniture to set up, he would like to come and help me. I said that I could have some other friends do that, and not to bother. But he insisted. Many times he told me that it would be good for him too, to help me, because he would feel useful to someone, and that I could understand. He came over to help me set up my one-person bed. It is funny how he nervously looked at his phone, I think to see if his wife had texted or something. He also hinted at it. I asked, then why don't you just say that you are here with me? I'm just your friend, and she's welcome to come over any time if it is very small. He got very uncomfortable and mumbled something. I noticed that he tried to do anything that he could to touch me, stroke my hand, arm, anything. And I'm one of those people who doesn't like being touched without consent, and I'm very fond of my personal space. I tried to place myself as far away from him as I could. At one point, he tried grabbing my waist. I very awkwardly wiggled out, and he stood there for a second, and said very quickly, and almost under his breath, "Why are you afraid of me?" And then quickly started talking for 3 minutes non-stop about anything and everything. That's when I really realized that he makes me uncomfortable. So I took the rest of the remaining spine in my back. It was almost non-existent at this point. I let him finish his rant, and then, while he was working on screwing 2 more planks together, I said, "But when you come here and do all of this very nice handiwork, we are all clear that you don't expect, something in return, right?" And involuntarily he paused for just that tiny little second that said it all. And then quickly he denied and said, "No, of course not. You know that I'm married, and, well..." And then he mumbled something. I really don't know how to handle this. I said, "Good, because you know that nothing of that kind will ever happen." I don't know if I can be any clearer. And then I added, "If it is, I do have some Portuguese friends that can help me with the little furniture that I need here." And he reminded me that he's mostly helping me to help himself. Remember, my situation at home isn't great, and I feel good when I help you. I sat down on my mattress, and then he came over and took my hands. I don't even remember what he was talking about, just that I tried taking them back, pulling away, but he held on for 10 more seconds. I finally pulled away, sat up against the wall, and yes, the atmosphere became really awkward, and then he freaking grabbed my feet. Oh yes, I just looked confused at him, and he let go. And then came the phrase that made everything painfully clear. "You know, when I'm in the bathroom, pleasuring myself, I think of you." I was stunned, like this is not happening. Stunned, like the end of the world stunned. I just sat there, like after a shock by stun gun, and finally found out how to speak again, and said, "That is truly disgusting. I should just take the hammer and bash it in with you." He quickly said in a sad, sad tone, "Yes, I know. I deserve to be punished." and again I was stunned beyond belief, like such a mess of emotions all at the same time. I said, okay, you've been nice to me through this time, and a lot of people have not. I know that men take frustration out otherwise than women, and so on. I'm willing to understand. So I'll give you one last chance, and pretend that you never said that. Let's pretend that it was a stupid oops. It never happened. We all make mistakes. But please, never ever say or think anything like that ever again. I will be clear once again. You and I will never have a physical relationship. I only like you as a friend, and I see you as a nice uncle or something. Doing something with you is not possible. And I swear he answers this with a simping, whining low key. But why? I'm in a state of equal pity for him. Disgust, hatred, more pity, and pure distress. I want to answer, because I do not in any way find you attractive. I should maybe have said that, but I didn't want to hurt his feelings. He was already very unhappy, and I didn't want to make anything worse. He had been talking a lot about suicide the last couple of times that we saw each other, and I do now think that it was just a manipulation tactic, but I took it very seriously back then. I said as calmly as possible, because I see you as an uncle of sorts, and that would be like incest for me, and nothing will change that. He left in a hurry after looking at his phone, and I assume reading a text right after, but he came back the next day to finish his work. Again letting me know that he just wanted to finish what he started. Fair enough, I thought. But then it happened. He repeated word for word the statement of the day before, but with a little more detail. What happens when he's alone in his bathroom? This time I've had enough. He wanted to come over some days later to make me some goulash soup. I said, trying to be politically correct still, if you make some for your family and have some left over, I'd love for you to bring me a Tupperware at work. 2 days later, I was driving my bus. I saw him standing in the corner of the bus and train station. I had a 10-minute wait at this terminal, and I was just sitting and chilling in my bus, waiting a bit on my phone, and looked up a couple of times afterwards. He stood in the same place, arms crossed, head tilted a little downward as to look at me with that angry bull stare, and he stared. He just stood there for 10 minutes and stared through the front windshield of my bus. I had waved at him in passing, but nothing. No wave back. Okay, I was happy when the timer went off and my bus had to leave, but still that was pretty weird. I had been flirting with a man for some time. We started dating later on that year. I had been single for 8 months then, and finally found someone that made me happy, that I made happy, and that was all the opposite of all the men that I had known to be in at work, at school, friends, love interests, things like that. Mirko texted me and asked if the rumors were true, and I happily confirmed. Sometime later, he wrote me some strange messages. I replied with a longer text, explaining to him that his behavior towards me had been unacceptable, that if he wants a woman to like him, maybe don't tell her that you jerk off to her in the bathroom, and maybe try listening to her. I also wrote that it is also a good idea to listen to people when they tell you several times that they are not attracted to you, and maybe don't try groping a girl, because it is very distressing. He answered with, I think you have misunderstood something, and I don't know what you're talking about, and sorry that you misunderstood. Again, that's all. That needed no answer from me, because the disillusion from Mirko was complete for me. P.S. I saw him once more a year later. He pretended not to see me when he drove past me with his bus, and I was next to another colleague in her bus, standing. It's literally impossible to miss. He still looked like a man whose life is over, and I still felt a little sorry for him. I would have liked him to find some happiness in his life, too. He wasn't necessarily a bad person. He just, despite his age, has some growing up to do, mentally. I don't work in that city anymore, and I have moved pretty far away, and as for me, I'm still with that wonderful man that I met back then, and we are engaged and getting married sometime next year. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.